Test one, two, test one, two. Test one, two.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to tonight's segment of the Faculty Lecture Series. For those of you who may not know who I am, I'm Jessica Lardy. I'm Director and Professor, and I run the lecture series here. So thanks for attending tonight's lecture. Keep an eye out for future lectures in my campus emails, or grab a rat card up over there. Our next lecture will be next Thursday, featuring Dr. A.J. Webb of Healthcare Administration in the School of Business. So this evening's event is presented by Dr. Chris Schwinghamer of Biology from the School of Sciences, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. Dr. Schwinghamer is an assistant professor where he's teaching and research focuses on fisheries management and aquatic ecology. He earned a PhD in forest resource science from West Virginia University, where his doctoral research focused on factors influencing brook trout population dynamics and resilience in central Appalachian headwater streams. He also holds a Master of Science in Natural Science from Southeast Missouri State University with a thesis that investigated paddlefish reproductive ecology and a Bachelor of Science in Biology with an emphasis in zoology from Emporia State University. Tonight's lecture is titled Upper Rio Grande Basin Ecology, a case study in place-based learning, and in his words, the Upper Rio Grande Basin in Colorado is an ecologically unique, arid basin. Due to the geographic location and the interesting and unique nature of the region, this basin provides unique opportunities for place-based learning for Adams State students in the natural sciences. Despite being well suited to take advantage of the opportunities, barriers do exist in the full exploitation of these educational opportunities, such as funding and the time commitments involved. In the summer of 2025, 4 Adams State biology students participated in a place-based learning opportunity in which ecological research was performed in the Upper Rio Grande Basin. Students got the opportunity to learn field and lab-based research skills, data collection and analysis, and communication of research as part of this summer's research. Providing the opportunities to students prepares them well for a future career in the natural sciences and provides them with foundational skills in any STEM field. In this lecture, he'll present on the data that was collected and analyzed by students, as well as the efficacy of providing these types of opportunities to students. So help me in welcoming Dr. Schwinghamer.
I'm not used to holding a microphone, so I don't know where to hold it here. Close, far away? I don't know. We'll find out. We'll all work on this together. So, as Jess said, I'm just going to present a little bit about a summer research project I did with some students here in the San Luis Valley. So, this valley gives us an excellent opportunity to take advantage of place-based learning opportunities, right? When we say place-based learning, we're talking about educational opportunities for students that are centered around sort of our local environment or history or culture in some way, right? So that is what we mean when we say place-based learning. And place-based learning has been shown to improve student educational opportunities in a number of ways. It has been shown to increase student engagement. It can foster local stewardship. It can help students translate abstract theories that maybe they're learning in the classroom into real-world applications. And it also helps students create ownership over their own education, right? So as students are going out, they're getting these sort of hands-on opportunities to do this sort of educational work, and it helps them, one, connect with their local environment, their local history, their local culture, depending on what you're doing, as well as sort of take ownership over their own education. Here in the Upper Rio Grande Basin is where, obviously, we are here at Adams State. And this basin provides a really unique opportunity for us to study the ecology of our region, right? This provides opportunities for natural science research and is a resource to our students, right? Our location is a resource to our students that maybe we don't always take the best advantage of, right? I always like to tell students that ecology should be a place-based thing. You should care about your local environment, right? a lot of students go into ecology and wildlife biology or whatever these sort of natural science fields because they're watching nature documentaries, right? And I love nature documentaries. That's why I sort of went into these fields too. But nature documentaries really focus on like 5 ecosystems in the world, right? It's like the Amazon and the African savanna and Antarctica and all these cool places. And students often see those and think to themselves, man, I want to do that one day. These places are so cool. And they forget about what's in their own backyard, right? And I always like to make sure students know that you can make an entire career in ecology without going to Brazil, right? Without going to Antarctica, right? It's much more likely, as a faculty at this school, that you're going to be able to give students these opportunities right here in our own backyard, because I'm not any time soon getting a $100 million grant to take a group of students to Brazil, right? It ain't happening anytime soon. So we need to take advantage of our local ecosystems, and that's what we have here in the San Luis Valley with our upper Rio Grande Basin. But there are challenges to using these resources here in the valley. In terms of a lot of our education is coming in the form of courses, right? So we teach our courses, and hopefully we can give students these opportunities, these place-based opportunities, but often it's very difficult. It's challenging for a lot of reasons, right? There's time constraints. My class periods are 50 minutes, or sometimes I have labs that are up to 3 hours long, right? Some of our field sites, our farthest away field sites, were about how far away, Nick? Like 3 hours, right? Our farthest away field sites were like 3 hours away, right? I can't get to those sites during my class periods, right? I don't have an 8-hour class period to teach students about things, right? So there's time constraints associated with course-based experiences. And that limits our ability to sort of add depth to these projects, right? We do a lot of CURES in STEM, our course-based undergraduate research opportunities. And these CURES are great. They get students in the field, but we're very limited in what we can do. We take them out sort of one time, we collect some data, and they write a little report about it, right? So they don't have the depth that they really need to get immersed into this research. They don't really have all of the background information all the time that would sort of help them really dive into this research in a way that they could otherwise, right? They don't get all the real-time data collection that they could potentially get, right? One solution to these constraints is doing things over the summer. Having these big summer projects, like we did this last summer, gives us an opportunity to do a more sustained sort of in-depth research opportunity. Students can get more immersed in the research. They can have a greater understanding of the research. They can develop skills more complexly. They have more time to master these advanced skills. They have more experience, more ability to take advantage of these opportunities. And it allows us to collect more authentic data, right? The data we collect in our CURES is great, but it's very shallow, tends to be. We can collect more deeper, more authentic, better data, given that we have more time, we have more ability to do these things. So this summer model has worked, at least this last summer, I think worked really great for our students, but there are also challenges with that too. So there's obviously challenges associated with doing these summer models, right? Funding can be a challenge. I was lucky enough to be able to take advantage of a couple grants we had in STEM, but those grants aren't going to be around forever, right? And they're going away faster and faster every day, it seems like, right? So funding can be an issue. Time constraints can also be an issue, right? As a faculty, I have I have a lot of time typically over the summer, but I didn't get paid for my work this last summer. I did it out of the kindness of my own heart and my interest in making sure these students get these opportunities, because I really am passionate about working with students and doing student research and having these students sort of get these experiences. So I donated my time this summer, but students also have time commitments, right? Students have other jobs. Maybe they're not staying around all summer. So there's a lot of challenges with making sure you can get students to participate in these things. And then resources and logistics can also be a problem, right? Here at Adams State, we're a very small university. Sometimes we're resource limited in certain ways. So making sure we have the resources we need and have people that have time, that's me, right, or whoever is running these programs, to do the logistics and all that kind of stuff is also can be a challenge, right? But if we can overcome all of these challenges and provide students with these sort of summer, immersive, place-based research opportunities, we can give them a formative experience, right? Prepare them for a future career, right? I always also like to tell students, right, every student in this country that is doing a wildlife degree is taking basically the same class as you are, right? So what sets you apart, right? What are you going to do that sets you apart from all the other students that are also doing that degree, right? We're a small university. It's tough for students to sometimes get these research opportunities that undergrads might have at bigger universities, right? We don't have a master's program. We don't have a PhD program. Our undergraduates cannot go out with graduate students and get those experiences that they might be able to get at a bigger school, right? So for us as faculty, I think it's extra important that we provide our students with these opportunities that they otherwise may not have access to, that they might at a bigger school, right? Because we want our students to graduate here from Adams and be just as competitive for any of those jobs or graduate programs as a student from Colorado State, right? We want our students to be just as prepared as any other student in the country. I'm gonna grab my water here real quick. So, what we did was last summer, in the summer of 2025, I had 4 students work with me. One of them's right here, Nick, worked with me, but I had 3 other research interns / independent study students that all worked with me this summer to collect just a whole bunch of data over a bunch of different things in the field. So we went all over the valley, all the way up the Rio Grande to above the Rio Grande Reservoir, down to Lobatos Bridge. We collected samples pretty much in the entire Rio, the Colorado portion of the Rio at least. We also collected bird data. We did a bunch of bird surveys all around the valley, all the way from up by Crestone down by Antonito, Magoti area. So we collected data all over the valley this summer. And our goal was to, 1, understand different ecological communities in the valley, whether that's our riverine macroinvertebrate communities or avian communities, so bird communities, just in all sorts of different environments in the valley. And my goal was then to have students develop research projects, answer research questions that they come up with using the data that we collected. As part of this, students got a chance to develop a bunch of skills, right? They got opportunities to develop field skills, so we did a lot of macroinvertebrate sampling. This was sort of an expansion of their CURE project from Biology 209, which is their general biology class. In their 209 CURE, what they do is they collect macroinvertebrates from a couple different streams or rivers in the valley, and they compare those 2 sites, right? One of my students last spring indicated that he was interested in expanding on that project, so that's what we did. We expanded on their 209 project, and we expanded it to basically a longitudinal study of the Rio Grande, so looking at sort of how communities change as we move down the Rio Grande. We also did point counts for birds. That was just something I kind of added on because I was like, what can I do that I don't need a permit for, right? I can go listen to birds, right? I don't need a permit to listen to birds, so that's what we did. We went out, picked a bunch of sites, and did point counts for birds. So students got to learn skills like bird identification from calls, right? I'm not great at that. I'm not an ornithologist. I study fish. But we use some tools that are available to us. Things like the Merlin app, which is sort of an app that can identify birds. I think it uses AI. I'm not 100% sure how it works, but it listens to birds, and it can tell you what birds are there. And we collected basically presence-absence data on birds around the valley. We also gained a little bit of lab skills. Most of our lab work was processing macroinvertebrate samples and identifying macroinvertebrates to the genus level. So very fine scale identifications of macroinvertebrates. They learned how to use dichotomous keys. I have a giant book that's just full of dichotomous keys for every single genus of macroinvertebrates in all of North America. And Nick got very well acquainted with that book, right? Yeah, they learned how to use dichotomous keys, which is an important skill as a biologist. They learned how to do macroinvertebrate identification, also an important skill as an aquatic biologist. We do a lot of macroinvertebrate stuff. And just data collection and data sort of management type stuff is what they were working on there. And we're still sort of in this process. We haven't quite finished our data analysis yet. It's going a little slower than I anticipated, but that's okay. We'll get it done before a few weeks when they're giving their talks. So we're working on our data analysis now. Students are working with Dr. Lahiri to do some work in ArcGIS, and I will be working with them a little bit in Program R. So Program R is a statistical software, involves a lot of coding. Students have indicated they're interested in sort of learning how to do that, so I will be working with them once we have all of our data ready to go to do some basic analyses using Program R. Another thing they're learning as we are going through this is that real-world ecological data is messy, right? Ecology is a messy world, is a messy world, and things are not always how you want them to be with ecological data. And students are learning to deal with this, right? It's requiring patience from them, it's requiring creativity, it's requiring critical thinking as they are sort of looking at these data and they're seeing what the patterns say and how that might not necessarily align with what they thought it was going to say, right? So we need to, as a biologist, we follow what the data says. We don't sort of just let our preconceived notions drive what we think is going to happen. So our data says this, right? Why? Why do we think that is what our data said, right? So it takes a lot of thinking, takes a lot of creativity as a biologist to sort of tackle some of these things that are not lining up the way you wanted them to. So each student, again, developed a research project. One of these research projects is, for the most part, complete. The other three are sort of still in progress, and we're still sort of in our data analysis phase there. So I was going to present the data on these. We're a little bit behind, so I don't have data to present on those quite yet. I will present some quick and dirty analyses that I did with the data, but the student data isn't quite done yet. But our first project was our bird project, and one of my students was looking at habitat associations, two different types of jays in the valley, pinion jays and Steller's jays. One of my other students was looking at how land use affected our macroinvertebrate communities, so she is particularly interested in agriculture and the effects that agriculture might be having on our water quality and thus our macroinvertebrate communities. One of my students is looking at how macroinvertebrate communities change longitudinally, so as we move from our source down to sort of the border, essentially, how is that affecting our macroinvertebrate communities? And then our last project is looking at elevation. So actually, I just helped her do her analysis today, so we do have analysis on that. Just didn't have time to put it into this. This has sort of evolved into more of a test of what's called the river continuum concept, where she's looking at sort of changes in functional guilds, so how these insects make a living as we move from our headwaters down to sort of lower elevations, essentially. So we'll present a little bit of data that we have here, so I'm not going to get too in-depth here for the sake of time. But our first project that we're going to talk about, this one is for the most part complete, was looking at two different species of jays in the valley, pinion jays and Steller's jays, right? So they're both jays, so they're both relatively closely related. They're both in the family Corvidae, so they're corvids, related to things like crows and, I don't know, I'm not an ornithologist. Crows and other jays, I guess. I don't know. There's other things in there, too. It's a pretty big family. But So she was looking at sort of what types of habitats are these two birds using. They are relatively closely related, and both of them are very iconic Western North American species. Pinion jays are sort of more southwestern. Steller's jays are very common across much of the American West. Both require very specific habitats. So pinion jay is more of a specialist. Pinion jays specialize on pinyon forests. That's why they're called pinion jays. Whereas Steller's jays are a little bit more of a generalist, but tend to prefer coniferous forests. So they are sort of a mixed conifer forest type species. Pinion jays are also listed as a species of greatest conservation need by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So they are seeing reductions in populations and are being conserved in a special way by our local state agency. And Steller's jays are pretty ubiquitous, not listed, very common birds across the West. Kind of basically just the blue jays of the West, right? Blue jays are an eastern species. Steller's jays are sort of the western blue jay, essentially. When we look at sort of habitat, I'm going to go through a couple of graphs here. What we ended up doing, I was trying to do occupancy modeling with this, which is a little bit more of a sophisticated type of analysis, but I just think our sample size was too low, so our occupancy models weren't quite working. So what we did was instead we used logistic regression modeling to basically model what is the probability of occurrence of these birds across different covariates. The one covariate I'm going to present here is elevation. So we were looking at how these birds sort of varied in terms of whether or not they were going to be occupying a habitat at these different elevations. And what we see with pinion jays here is that we have our probability of occurrence on our y-axis, our elevations on our x-axis, and what we see is that as our elevation increases, our probability of occurrence of these birds decreases, right? So these birds do tend to, like the pinyon forest, and pinyon forests tend to be a little bit lower elevation than our mixed coniferous forests. As you go up the mountains, we tend to transition from sort of pinyon forest into sort of a mixed coniferous forest. And that's what we tend to see, right? We tended to see these birds in sort of pinyony habitats or habitats that were on the valley floor in sort of riparian areas near pinyon habitats, essentially, right? So that is what we saw there. We saw a decrease in occupancy or occurrence, not occupancy, probability of occurrence as we went up in elevation. Steller's jays, again, are a little bit more of a generalist. We didn't really see a very strong relationship here. We saw a very, very, very slight positive trend in terms of probability of occurrence and elevation. Again, they're more of a generalist. They prefer sort of mixed coniferous forest. So it sort of makes sense that they're very slightly going up, but they're tending to use a lot of different habitats across a lot of different areas of the valley. All right, so that's all I'm going to present for that project. If you want to see more, students will be presenting those here in a couple weeks. Our other project was with benthic macroinvertebrates, and if you're not familiar with benthic macroinvertebrates, these are aquatic invertebrates that tend to live on the bottoms of rivers and lakes and streams and all these aquatic environments. And what makes them important is that they tend to be bioindicators of water quality, right? So we can use these macroinvertebrate communities to tell us about the water quality without having to go out and collect water quality data, right? We don't have to go out and do water chemistry. We can just use the composition of these macroinvertebrate communities as sort of a proxy for water quality in general, right? We're not like saying this is going to tell us about the nitrate concentrations or anything like that. It's just sort of a general metric that can describe water quality. And what we were doing with this was, again, a longitudinal study of the Rio Grande. So we're looking at sort of how these communities change as we move from way up in the headwaters down to sort of the valley floor. and we're trying to see sort of what factors are affecting those changes. And again, students are not quite done with this. They're still in progress. If you are interested in seeing their results, they are giving a lunchtime talk on November 12th, so in about 3 weeks at noon in Porter 130. So come see them talk, and they will be able to share more of their results to their specific projects. But I did some basic analyses just to sort of have something to show you here. So the first thing I did was what is called a non-metric multidimensional scaling analysis. This is a type of multivariate analysis that basically it does what we call ordinates the data. So basically, it takes each sample and it says, how different is this sample from every other sample? And it gives that what's called a distance score, essentially. And using those distance scores, it puts those points in a 2 or 3 dimensional, really it can be any dimensional, that's why it's called multi-dimensional scaling. It's just sort of this n-dimensional space, essentially. So it just puts everything in its place. Here we're just looking at 2 of those dimensions. And what I did for this, just as a sort of, again, a quick and dirty analysis here, is I called any site that's sort of below South Fork a valley site. Any site that's above South Fork was considered a mountain site. So what we see here is when we did what's called a permanova, which is a permutational ANOVA, which basically just tests for differences in this sort of n-dimensional space. Oh, I lost my slide. Where'd we go? Hit a button, I think. Oh, all right. All right, let's find my spot again. Sorry, we're good, I'll find it. So when I ran this permanova with these 2 groups, valley sites and mountain sites, we did find that there was a significant difference in the community composition of those 2 groups. So again, this is just a very quick method that I did. Students will do more in-depth stuff because they'll have more of those covariates that they're calculating using GIS. So this is just, again, a very quick thing that I did to show we are seeing differences as we move from our mountains down into the valley in terms of our macroinvertebrate communities. All of these red are just the names of different families of macroinvertebrates. And all the black circles are sites. Another thing I did, this doesn't have any stats with it, it's just a graph that I made, was I calculated what's called the Colorado Macroinvertebrate Multimetric Index. This is an index that the state uses as a indicator of water quality. So this is a metric that the state calculates based on macroinvertebrate data, uses a lot of different indices. It's a little bit complex, and I'm not even 100% sure I calculated it right. What we found, based on this, was that we tend to see higher MMI scores, which higher MMI scores tend to indicate higher water quality. So our higher MMI scores here were associated with our sort of more upstream sites, and our lower MMI scores were associated with our more downstream sites, except for these 2 sites here. So these 2 sites here are Ute Trailhead and 30 Mile Trailhead. And if you're familiar with sort of the Rio Grande Reservoir area, you might know that 30 Mile Trailhead is basically right below Rio Grande Reservoir Dam, and Ute Trailhead is right above the reservoir. So both of these sites are within the sort of influence of that reservoir. One's right below, and one is basically right above the reservoir. And I would guess, I don't have any data that would support this, but I would guess that that is what is causing these 2 sites to have lower water quality scores than we would expect, given that they are up really high in the watershed. So that's just some quick look at our data that we collected this summer. Another part of our summer experience was that I had students complete a survey at the end of their experience. I wasn't thinking about this before they did it, should have done a pre-survey too. but I didn't think about that. So we just have a post survey where basically we ask students to complete a survey, or I ask students to complete a survey that asks them to rate themselves on several different things, right? So like self-efficacy, how confident they are, understanding of the research process, confidence in environmental science, confidence in talking about these types of things with people. And I'll share some of the results from that survey. So our first question I guess two questions that I asked in the survey were, before the summer, how would you have rated your understanding of ecological research? This is where a pre-survey probably would have been better than asking them this, but I didn't think about that again. And then after their summer research, how would you rate your understanding of ecological research? Students tended to rate their understanding better after their summer experience than before their summer experience, right? On average, this was on a 1 to 5 scale. So their pre-rankings were on average about 3.5, and their post-rankings were closer to 5, right? So students really indicated that they grew in their understanding of ecological research as part of this project. Another note here, my N was only 4, so my sample size, very low. Not the strongest survey, but I only had 4 students working for me, so this is the data that I could get. I also asked students on a scale of 1 to 5 how much the summer research experience helped improve their skills in these various areas, so scientific method and research design, field-based data collection techniques, data analysis and interpretation, and understanding of local ecosystems and environmental issues. Students rated that their summer research experience improved their understanding a great deal, especially on things that they took more of a part in, right? Students took a big part in their summer field collection. They took a big part in their local, sort of this place-based part of it. Most of this research design was, I sort of designed it, so they didn't have as much of a part in that. And then they hadn't done their data analysis yet when they did this survey. So sort of makes sense that those are not quite as well rated as our other two. The next question was, how confident do you feel in your ability to independently design a small-scale research project? This was also sort of on a 1 to 5 scale, from not confident at all to extremely confident. Most students rated themselves a 4, right? So most students now, after doing this project, feel pretty confident that they could design a small-scale research project and do it themselves, essentially, right? Probably could have been a 5, but again, I did most of the experimental design for the summer thing. I could probably improve that. I could probably do a little bit of a better job explaining like why I designed things in the way I did. I tried to explain it. Maybe I could improve on that going forward. The next question was, again, a series of questions that asked students to what extent did the summer research help you develop these sort of more general skills. So the last set of skills were sort of more specific or targeted towards research. These are sort of more general skills, teamwork and collaboration, communications, time management, those kinds of things. Students, again, rated their development in these skills very high, 4s or 5s on everything. Not as high on teamwork, so I guess they didn't like each other that much. The next question was, how confident, or do you feel more confident presenting, or discussing local ecological topics with your peers or others? This was just sort of a yes, no, or maybe. 3 out of the 4 students said yes. 1 student said maybe. We didn't have any students that said no. So students tend to sort of feel more confident in their knowledge and their ability to discuss these issues with other people. The next set of questions were sort of more open-ended to sort of get some quotes from students. So this next question was, what was the most valuable thing you learned or experienced during your summer research? I just sort of picked out some what I felt were sort of important parts of these quotes. This student said, learning how to put my knowledge into action, right? And take what I've learned in class and apply it to real world situations. And overall, this experience has me excited to bring my new skills and knowledge into future research endeavors, right? So this is really touching on, it's giving these students sort of a more hands-on experience, giving them the ability to take these things they're learning in their classes that maybe might seem sort of esoteric or theoretical and apply them to something real world. So it connects what they're doing in class to sort of real world applications. And that, I think, is really beneficial to these students. Our next question was, how did working on a real place-based project compare to a traditional classroom or lab setting? One student said, more relaxed and easier to absorb information. I think this is just because we have more time, right? It's more personal. You are working more closely with students. They have more time to think about these things, more time to absorb that information, and really get more out of their education. Another student said, it made me realize there is so much more to research than I expected. It showed me the challenges of real world research, but also how valuable it is to apply classroom knowledge in a practical setting. So students, again, are touching on this importance of taking what they learn in the classroom and applying it in the real world, right? And I think that's a very powerful way for students to learn, is to see that what we're teaching them in the classroom isn't just for our benefit, right? I don't just teach you these things for funsies, right? I teach you these things because they're important, right? We're going to use them, or you're going to use them in the future as part of your career. Another student, or the next question was, please provide a one-sentence summary of your overall experience. This student says, it gave me lasting knowledge and strengthened my confidence in pursuing a career in research, right? So that is hitting on that self-efficacy thing, right? So these students, after doing this, right, maybe they wouldn't have seen themselves pursuing a career in research, or they would think that maybe research isn't for me. Maybe I'm not able to do research. But now they've done this research. They feel more confident in their ability to go into research as a potential career. And then I asked students to share one piece of advice with other students considering a similar research opportunity, and this student said, don't consider it, do it, right? So this student really had a good experience this summer, and he would tell other students, stop considering doing it and just do it, right? Another student said, it's okay to feel confused at times, don't be afraid to ask questions, and research is a learning process, right? So this hits on the importance of maybe that they're a little bit unconfident in their skills, but it's okay, right? Everyone has these times where they're less than confident in their abilities, right? I feel that all the time, right? I feel like I don't know what I'm doing 90% of the time when I'm doing anything. But it's okay, right? Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to get help. And research, just like everything in life, is a learning process. Nobody's perfect at research the first day they start, right? So ultimately, these types of experiences are important in sort of investing in, I feel. So I think it's important to invest in these sort of immersive learning opportunities because they help do a lot of things, right? They help build foundational skills, they help increase confidence, they help increase career identity, and they build lasting knowledge of local issues, right? So some things that I think we could talk about as a faculty going forward is how can we better integrate these opportunities campus-wide, and what are some strategies we can use for overcoming funding and time and all these barriers that might exist to implementing these sort of summer place-based opportunities that are really immersive and really help students learn and grow in their confidence and their abilities as during their time here at Adams State. So that's kind of all I got. I just need to acknowledge my funding, right? So funding for our travel came from our NSF grant to improve STEM undergraduate education, and I had a couple of students getting paid off of our Title III grant in STEM. Special thanks to Aaron Montoya, who was running this NSF grant. Ken and Sarah for their help with getting students paid out of that Title III grant, and Dr. Lahiri, Troyan Lahiri, for his help with students and their GIS stuff that they're currently working on now. And also my student researchers, Mackenzie, Nick, Amelia, and Kelsey, who really toughed it out this summer. I think we got hailed on, like 3 times this summer? So yeah, they kept coming back even after they kept getting hailed on every time we would try to go to the mountains. So that's kind of all I got. With that, I can take any questions if we have. I think we have some time for questions. Or if you have other things, this is my contact information. My name is not the easiest to spell, so maybe take a picture of that and send it that way. Yep.
How far above the New Creek Trailhead?
We went up to Brewster Park, so I'm not. Nick is the one that's calculating all of those distances. I'm not sure how far upstream that is, to be honest. Yeah.
So how did the water quality change from the Brewster Park sample to the New Creek Trail?
We can look. We can go back to our graph here, and our Brewster Park sample was basically equivalent to all of our samples below. So it was high water quality up there. Because it's pretty far above the reservoir, so I think it's sort of outside of the influence there. I can't say exactly what changed because we don't have any water chemistry data or any of that, but so based on these metrics, it just seems like for whatever reason our water quality has gone down. And there can be a lot of things that reservoirs can do in terms of affecting your water quality. A big one is that it really changes the type of substrate you have. So as the water slows, yeah, but it slows, right? So as it's going into the reservoir, it's slowing down, and that is causing finer sediments to drop out, and that can have a particularly large impact on our macroinvertebrates who are on the bottom. So as that finer sediment as the water is slowing down, the finer sediments are dropping out. You're starting to lose some of your more sensitive macroinvertebrates. Nick?
You kind of talked about the idea of it a few times and you noticed the importance of place-based learning and whatnot. And then you asked us at the end of everything what we thought about it to our peers. But what would you say to your peers about trying to get the students to do this stuff or come up with ideas during the summer? Because you said at the beginning you didn't get anything for doing it, you just donated your time.
Yep.
So
I would say don't consider it, do it. No, I would say it's a really valuable thing to do, and I understand it's not necessarily feasible for everybody to do this over the summer if you're not getting any sort of compensation for it. But I do think it is really important, and I do think it's something that really benefits the students for sure. Marty, do you have a question? No, we did not have time. So one of the days we were out doing macroinvertebrates, I think we left campus at 7, and we didn't get back till 10 o'clock at night. So we didn't have a lot of time. We were trying to get as many samples done as we could. So it would have been nice to do some fishing up there, but no, we didn't have any time to do that. Oh, sorry. There's other project ideas that I have. Right now, I'm trying to get some money from Trout Unlimited to do some work, not on the Rio, but with a project that they have at Jim Creek, which is sort of above Lahara Reservoir, to do some brook trout or non-native trout population dynamics and sort of model out what proportion of the population do we actually need to remove regularly before we overfish that population? Because we want to, in theory, right? Our goal is to overfish that population of non-native trouts. That's why they're doing these removals. So that is sort of the next thing that I'm hoping to do next summer. Did you have another question? Lobatos Bridge, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was, I think maybe the only site we had crayfish was down at Lobatos Bridge. They tend to sort of like lower, warmer waters, so we didn't get any upstream. I think we may have run into a few here in Alamosa, but I think vast majority of them we ran into at Lobatos Bridge. So I really am passionate about getting students involved in research. So the big thing that I am getting out of this is really working and mentoring this smaller group of students on developing these research projects. And ultimately, my goal is to take at least some of these students to a conference in the spring to present their research. And I just find it really rewarding to work with students and do this research and see them sort of grow in their sort of confidence and their abilities to really contribute to the body of science, essentially, right? That's sort of how I feel about it. And I also am learning a lot, right? I'm still relatively new to the Valley. I'm not like brand new anymore, but relatively new to the Valley. So I always love to learn about these local ecosystems, and I'm learning a lot as they're learning as well. Sarah? That was it was alive. Yeah, it's a gopher snake. Yeah. We were just driving back from one of our bird surveys and I saw a snake on the side of the road and I was like, Nick, I'm stopping. Go get this snake. So he jumped out and he grabbed the snake. So that wasn't part of our research. We just found it on the side of the road. Yeah.
Was the Merlin app pretty successful?
It seemed to be. Again, I'm not an expert, so if Tim was out there with us, he'd probably be like, this thing is really bad. But for me, I was like, it's way better than I could do. So, yeah, so I'm not 100% sure on that. I would be interested in doing I would be interested in doing a project where, like, someone that is really good, like Tim, comes out with us and we compare, like, his list to the Merlin list and do something like that. I think that would be an interesting project for students, too. We tried as much as possible, yeah. So we did have binoculars and things, so when we could see them, we would try to confirm. And usually it seems like, I mean, there are some like little warblers that like all sound very similar, it seems, and it picked them out, and we even saw it, so I know that it was right up in the mountains. So I'm not, yeah, it's hard to say for sure because I'm not an ornithologist, but it seems like it was working well. But yeah, it's hard to say. Some of them are also really easy, like crows. All right, if that's all, thanks everybody for coming.